Phil Rouss was one of those old-fashioned guys whose whole life was devoted to vintage cars. The story goes that the day he found this abandoned Model A Ford in a cotton warehouse, he was totally hooked, and cars were his life. Ka-chow. He'd finally gotten to a place in life where he was able to quit his job and follow his dreams of opening up an antique car restoration business. He built the garage near his home and asked his friend Kimo Coelho if he was interested in working with him, and the two agreed to split the profits equally and call the business K&P's Auto Restoration. Cute, right? When Steve White, Phil's neighbor of 15 years, poked his head over the fence one day and asked if they needed any help, Steve was officially in the business. The agreement the three came up with was that Phil was the head of the business who would contribute the capital, Kimo would do the actual hands-on restoring of the cars part, and Steve would be more of a silent partner who handled the business finances and all the not fun paperwork K&P didn't want to do themselves. Kimo and Steve didn't exactly get along, but Phil always provided that buffer between the men. But then Phil got sick. For a man nearing his 60s, this was cause for some concern at first, but Phil tried to push through it, thinking it was just the flu or some sort of bug he'd get over. And with Phil not able to be around as much, Kimo and Steve's civil relationship started to become strained. By June of 1997, Kimo decided to quit working for K&P because he just couldn't deal with the stress of Phil's sickness on top of working with Steve all the time. Phil's condition was also getting worse. By then, he was having trouble walking, had lost 30 pounds, and even scarier, he was starting to have memory problems. Steve told Phil, if you're sick, you can stay home and you get well. I can handle it. But while resting at home, Phil caught wind that his company allegedly wasn't paying the bills and that the money coming into the business wasn't being distributed back out to their suppliers. Phil went to the bank and found out that 10 company checks written by Steve had bounced because of insufficient funds. Well, the company not having any money was news to Phil, so he requested copies of the checks and found out his partner had been using the funds to pay for his own personal expenses, like his phone bill, military insurance, and his many shopping sprees at the local liquor store. Then Phil noticed a check made out to some company called American National for $127, and he didn't know what that was, so he gave them a call. They told him that they were a life insurance company, and Phil asked if they could tell him more about the policy Steve White held. They told him that Steve Allen White had a $100,000 life insurance policy on his business partner Phil Rouss that he was making monthly payments to. Phil paid a visit to one of the top forensic toxicologists in the US. It was probably one of the only times in history someone was excited to hear that they were being poisoned. Every time he and Steve had a meal or drink together was when his illness would flare up, and he'd be immediately sick afterwards. Steve was a chemist and taught the subject at the local high school, so if anyone was gonna get their hands on some arsenic, it's this guy. When Bartlett PD heard about Phil's poisoning, along with his already ongoing financial dispute, they knew they needn't look far for their perpetrator. After a week-long trial, the jury found Steve Allen White guilty of poisoning and stealing from his business partner, Phil Rouss, and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. I don't know about you guys, but next time iTunes updates their terms of agreement and wants me to click OK, I might give that little guy a once-over, just in case.